Hello, boom, chicka, wow, wow. Thought I'd mix it up a little bit. Welcome to my Orgasmic Life. I'm your hostess, Gaia Morrissette, and I'm going to talk to you about some ways to expand your masturbation time, your whack out time, your whack off time. You're rubbing one out. You're flipping the bird, choking the chicken. For everybody who is at home with, quarantine, social distancing, COVID-19 stuff that aren't sick, and you have plenty of time on your hands, and you've been, and you haven't been able to, if you're not happen to be in kind of lockdown with, your lover, so you are been, by yourself, I want to talk about, let's add some expansion to your masturbation time. You're probably bored. Right? All right, so let's talk about your spank bank. Let's add some more stuff to your spank bank. And if you're like, well, Gaia, what's a spank bank? It sounds like so much fun. I know, right? Well, a spank bank is a Rolodex of fantasies. And I stole it. I stole that statement from a dear friend of mine who years ago, he's like, oh yeah, it's totally like, I'm putting that in my spank bank. I was like, what? What's your spank bank? He's like, all the things that I put in my fantasies that go into my Rolodex so that I pull it out when I'm spanking it. I'm like, oh, so we're going to expand our spank bank. Because the last time I talked about expanding your masturbation. I was talking about changing your orgasmic pattern. So now let's go into what we think about while we are touching ourselves. All right, so before we get into the juicy stuff, everybody who might find this conversation triggering, so I really want to acknowledge you. This might not be a good episode for you. However, I lovingly invite you to lean in a little bit to it because there might be some places that you might add a new dimension to how you explore masturbation with yourself. And if the idea of masturbation is really uncomfortable for you, then please reach out to me and we can heal the shame, sexual shame, and guilt and trauma that might be attached to that. And you can reach me at succulentliving.com. All right, let's go back to the whacking. Another term that my personal favorite term for masturbation is whacking off. And I think it's kind of funny because, I have a vagina. But I'll give you a little bit of a backstory of where this, whacking off and why as a girl, identifying as a girl with a vagina, owner of a vagina, why I actually use it. Because I think it's kind of funny and it's like very like raw. Right. And it breaks all the rules. As a owner of a vagina, I'm supposed to not talk about masturbation. I'm supposed to be, there's all this societal stuff about, if I do it, I'm supposed to be very quiet about it and I'm not supposed to tell everybody about it. But if I had a penis, then societally from, North American society, it's like assumed that all penis owners, masturbate and whack off. So I've taken that term and I've owned it for for a political reason. The other reason is that when I was in my 20s, I had a friend of mine who used to say it all the time. She's like, she'd be like, hey, how's your day? Did you whack off today? And she was so tiny. Like she was like, I don't know. She was like up to my boobs height, and she was like really petite. And it was just so funny, her coming out like, have you whacked off today? Or she would talk about, this is what I did. This is what I was thinking about when I whacked off. And I just was like, wow, this is awesome. So that's where that terminology, that's how I've reclaimed that terminology for myself. All right. You can call it whatever you want. masturbation, self-love, self-exploration, you know, choking the chicken, rubbing one out, you know, playing with your honey pot, whatever you want to call it. All right? The language is yours to embrace. All right, so let's go back to Spank Bank. So often, as I was like the last episode, I was talking about masturbation during, you know, expanding your masturbation support. You know, we talked about orgasmic pattern, and one of the things that happens is that our bodies and our brains respond to variety and things that are different, and we get excited. Our arousal rate and our arousal comes from that place of excitement. And when we think about, just like as we stroke and we're in the same position, all those stuff, when we do the same thing every time, what happens is that our brain stops producing a wonderful chemical called dopamine, which is the excitement drug that happens with newness, right? And so what happens is that if you always think about the exact same thing, you're stuck in an orgasmic pattern that is interfering in many different aspects. One, it's limiting your orgasmic possibilities, your orgasmic pleasure possibilities. Two, it's limiting your possibilities of expanding your sexual realm of possibilities. And three, it keeps you very stuck in your limited experience, okay? So we all have a box, okay? And in this box is our acceptable parameters of sexual norms. For each of us is different. What's in our box, how big our box is, how much Kegels you do with your box. No, just joking. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. All right, back on point. Okay, where was I? Oh, yes, our box, all right? Our sexual norm box. And what happens is that when we masturbate, it is our opportunity to expand our box, to put in new possibilities, to create new sexual norms, new desires. And it's where we use our imagination. And our imagination helps us be really good creative problem solvers. Like that's, you know, being able to be a creative problem solver has a lot to do with how much fantasy, your brain capacity. So it exercises that muscle, the imagination muscle, which in turn relates to creative problem solving. So in essence, the more you fantasize, the better your brain will be for it. Okay, so I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you permission that you're whacking off to increase your brain capacity so that you can do creative problem solving. And at this time in our history, we need to do a lot of creative problem solving because we need to adapt to the new circumstances of the way that the world is working. So masturbation is good for your brain, but only if you're using your fantasies and your brain capacity while you're doing it. Which means that we're going to take a little bit out of, we're going to change how we engage with pornography. Okay, so let's talk about porn for a second. When we watch porn, it prevents our own imagination from having to engage. Okay, so our brain gets lazy, basically. That's why we veg out when we're watching TV. Well, our brain veges out when we're whacking off. The same thing. Okay, if we're watching porn. However, reading porn that allows you to drop into putting yourself in the story, what this does is it fires up your brain to engage with your imagination. And remember, imagination is good. The more imagination, the more creative problem solving, the more you can adapt, and the better life is. Okay? That's train advance. Okay. Other ways to achieve the exercise that brain capacity is doing like guided meditations and stuff, but it's not nearly as fun as whacking off and fantasizing. But it also kind of does the same thing, right? Okay, so you want to open up the possibility of your spank bank. And the way that we do this is because we get stuck in a routine. It's like, this is the thing, this is my go-to, this is what my go-to is, this is what my go-to is, this is what my go-to is. And then all of a sudden your go-to isn't really working for you anymore. Well, part of that is because your brain is bored of it. Secondly, that it also can, two things can happen. You can be bored of it, or you now have created such a strong neural pathway of your orgasmic response that the only way that you can actually have an orgasm is if you were thinking about or performing whatever that is in your spank bank. And it also, you also run the risk of being so attached to the fantasy that's in your spank bank that no person can actually achieve, and you can never actually achieve it, so you never get the sexual satisfaction and gratification that you really desire to have. Okay, so it kind of sets you up for the impossible, right? So there's some of the downfalls of having the same go-to. That's why you want to have a big variety. So you have a huge Rolodex of possibilities, okay? So you don't get stuck in one loop over and over and over again. So how do we expand our spank bank? So for some of us, you may have a great imagination. For some of us, we may not have an imagination at all. The only thing that we ever think about when we do fantasize, if we do fantasize, is about past experiences that we've had. So we're gonna add, we're gonna push this a little bit, okay? Depending on what level you are, right? We're gonna expand your spank bank. So if you don't have an imagination, meaning that you haven't been practicing it and expanding it and exploring it, that's okay. We're gonna start simple. I want you to pick, we're gonna go to reading sex stories. All right, this is how we're going to start this process. You're going to go and you're going to pick a genre of sex stories, something that you may have never really thought about. And, or actually, no, for your newbies, okay, pick a genre that you know, that you've had some experience with, or you've thought about, or you've seen somewhere in a movie or something, okay? So pick something that's familiar enough so that you can explore. So the first thing is if you're new to imagination and you're new to creating your own fantasies, you're going to pick a genre and you're going to read a story. And in that story, that sex story that you're going to read, you're going to drop yourself into one of the characters, as one of the characters in that story. And you're going to imagine yourself being that character while you're exploring your body and while you're playing with your genitals. And if you happen to have enough pleasure, a happy byproduct is an orgasmic release. But that's not the goal. It's just about pleasure, okay? All right, so that's first level. And once you do that a couple times and you're like, oh, that feels pretty good, I'm like, all right. So now you have some now data that you've added to your spank bank. You drop those stories into your spank bank. Then I want you to try to masturbate thinking about those stories without you having to read those stories. And of course you can change up the scenery, the background scenery, the characters, change it up. It's your spank bank, it's your story. You make it whatever happen. However you want it to happen. Okay? All right, that's level 1. Level 2 of expanding our spank bank is you're going to go pick a genre that you've never thought about and you've never fantasized about. And you've never even watched. And you're like, I don't even think that'll be my thing. I want you to go, hold on. Maybe I might sneeze. Here we go. Nope. Oh, that was unsatisfaction. It's like I was so close, so close. Anyways, okay, back to next level. All right, so you're going to pick a genre in something that you've never thought about. And you're going to read. And again, we're going back. We're staying in the reading section, and we're staying away from the visual porn because we want to be able to engage our brain in engagement, okay? When we are visually seeing things, it does a lot of the work for us, and our brain imagination becomes lazy, okay? So that's why not that I have anything against watching porn, but that's the reason why I'm saying we're going to stay in the story realm, okay? So you're going to pick a genre. And while you're picking this genre, you're going to allow your body, because we have judgments. There's all sorts of judgments. And I'm going to tell you a story about my own adventure in a second, okay? All right, like some mermaid sex and stuff that happened in my spank bank, okay? So I'm going to tell you a good story, all right? But just hold off, all right? So we have judgments about what we think is okay, what we think is right, what we think is wrong. This goes into our sexual norm box. You know that box I was talking about? Those are our sexual norms. And when we push our norms and we can move past those judgments and we just allow our bodies to be the indicator of arousal, we open ourselves up to expanding our arousal possibilities. And we let go of our judgments about it. Okay? And if you're like, Gaia, that sounds like that's way easier said than done. It's true. It is way easier said than done. That doesn't mean you can't do it, though. Okay. So you're going to pick a genre that you haven't thought about before. And while you're reading the story, I just want you to observe your body. What does your body, is your breathing getting heavier? What does your body's arousal response usually look like? So for me, when I'm getting turned on, a couple of things happen. First, my heart starts to kind of speed up. Then my breath gets a little breathy. See, actually, as I'm talking about it, my body is actually doing the changes. They're like, oh, we're getting turned on, right on. My clit starts to throb and blood starts to rush and my vaginal canal starts to pulsate. So those are some of the indicators that, and if I had access to my eyes, my pupils become like dilated. All right. And my eyelids start to get a little droopy. And I start touching myself a lot more. Usually start with like my neck and I'm like tickling myself and I start playing with my hair and I start to touch my arm. So yeah, I start touching myself. These are indicators of arousal response is waking up. So what I want you to do is, as you're reading your new genre on your story, I want you to let go of the judgment, not the psychological thought judgment that this is right, this is wrong, this is okay, I'm a weirdo, I'm a freak, all those judgments, all those thoughts. You're going to let all of that go, and all you're going to do is read it, and you're going to allow your body to respond. And if your body responds to something, I want you to take a note and write down what you were reading at that moment that you got a response from. Okay? And you're not going to judge it. You're going to let go of the judgment. You're going to let go of the judgment. You're going to grab the judgment. You're going to throw the judgment. You visualize this in your head. You're going to grab the judgment. You're going to throw it in the toilet. You're going to flush the toilet. Right? And you're going to just be like, and this is my arousal response. It's all good. Now, with that little piece of information of that genre, that story that you just read, the pieces that your body got some arousal responses from. Now I want you to dive into those specific things and see if you can find a story that can drop into that. If you can't find a story, then this is where you're going to now engage your own story in your own mind while you're masturbating. Okay? Go deeper into it. Go deeper into it and allow it to play itself out. Expand it. Expand what's attached, what's around it. Like, add to it. Make a story. Make a movie. You're making a movie in your head. Until you explore it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a thing that's now added to your spank bank. And now you have a new thing that's in your spank bank. And then enjoy that for a while, and then go and expand your spank bank. So me personally, I try to do this exercise personally. I have a really comprehensive spank bank, but I like to push my spank bank all the time, because this helps me to have this incredible creative problem solving. It also helps me to expand. See, now what happens is, once I've explored something in my spank bank individually with myself, and then I can decide, is this something that I want to explore with somebody else or other people? Or is this something that is just going to stay a fantasy? And if it's something that I want to explore with other people, then I can go to the next level of expanding and exploring that with other people. But it starts with me. And it gives me the safety when I'm exploring. It gives me that safety for me. All right, let's see, what else do I want to say about the spank bank? Ooh. Oh, I promised you a story. Okay, here's a story. I'm gonna leave. I know this is a long one. Sorry, I'm talking so much, but it's a big. It's like, I want you to know how to do it properly. You got all this free time. Let's make it worth it. Okay, let's expand your sexuality. So last week, I had an interesting experience. I was watching a movie, and as I was watching this movie, there was this scene of like this woman with this sea creature, and they're like having sexy time, and all of a sudden, like, my arousal response kicked in. I was like, what is happening here? I'm like, interspecies thing is not usually my thing. I'm like, what's going on? So anyways, I was like, but it created an arousal response in me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to lean a little bit more into it. So later on, a couple hours after I watched the movie, I was still kind of horny. And so I was like, oh, let's lean into this. So I decided to lean into it. But now I take up my vibrator. I got my womanizer. I'm all set up. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to think about, while I'm masturbating? And the image of the sea creature and the woman pops into my head. And I was like, and so here's the judgment. Part of me is like, that's weird. What is wrong with you? That's not okay. There's something really wrong with that. You've crossed the line. This is the limit. It's like, these were my thoughts. Okay. And so I say this, and I'm sharing this with you because I'm like an expert in this department. This is what I do. This is what I do for a living. I masturbate every day. I'm all about sexual exploration and freedom and liberation and blah, blah, blah. And even I have a box of social sexual norms. And I share that with you because I think it's important that it's not, you might listen to me and you're like, oh, she's so liberated and free, but I also still have my judgments. I have my stuff that I have to push through and work through. We all do. But we have a choice. Okay? So I push through it. I'm there. I got the vibrator between my legs. I'm having all these not sexy thoughts. And I use the tool that I just told you. I grab it. I'm like, I'm going to let go of the judgment. There's no one else here. This is just me and my brain and my body in this moment. And so what? It turns me on. Who cares? There's no harm. So I grab the judgments, all those noise, loud, obnoxious, not sexy thoughts. I grab them, I visualize them, I throw them in the toilet, I flush the toilet. And then I come back to, oh, well, this is kind of hot. Oh, I wonder what else I could think about from now this genre. And so I started to lean in, and actually I've been leaning into like Merpeople and Mer orgies and all sorts of stuff happened because I allowed myself to go through this adventure of expanding and pushing through my limited belief systems, my box. I've expanded my box. My box just got bigger. All right. And it now has all sorts of new possibilities that I never thought that would be okay. But it is okay. What does it matter if I want to have fantasize about having sex with merpeople or having orgies with merpeople? Who cares? It's my brain, my body, my arousal. It's all good. And that's why we want to expand our spank bank, so that you can find those things and explore those things in your own imagination and your own mind, and let go of the shame, let go of the judgment, and to expand your orgasmic pleasure, desire possibilities, your arousal response possibilities. All right. That's it. That's all. You want to spend more time with me, and if some of this stuff was like, whoa, this is really uncomfortable, a lot of judgment came up, a lot of shame came up, you just need some support on how to navigate all of those things and release all of that stuff, come find me at succulentliving.com. And for all your BDSM education and needs, you can find me at empressgaia.com. Don't forget to follow my podcast on all your favorite podcasting platforms. You can also find it at my website. And we have an app that you can download from Google Play called My Orgasmic Life. It's a podcast app that all you have to do is click on it. You have my little icon of me. Icon of me, and you just click it, and they have all the episodes there, and it's really easy peasy, and you can take me with you everywhere you go. Just a reminder that our episode today was sponsored by Tickle.life, T for all your sexual education. And don't forget, I teach fantastic online courses. So in everything from relationships to tantra to sexual skill building, I think I got 15 courses now. Yeah, they are fabulous. So while you're sitting at home, go take a course. Go learn. Learning and knowledge is sexy. All right, that's it. That's all. I love you. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Mwah!